From this lesson, you will learn how to create a custom form control validator in Angular that is compatible with template-driven forms. We will design the validator that will not allow users to enter specific words in the form field. You will learn how to display some meaningful error message when the validator fails, and besides that, you will learn something that is not covered by most of the tutorials about this topic. Namely, I will show you how to design your validator in a way so that it supports the dynamic validation, which means that the validation criteria might be changed at runtime depending on, for example, values from other form controls in your form. My name is Dmytro and I constantly create Angular content helping others to become advanced Angular developers. By the way, this tutorial is just a tiny part of my entire video course about Angular forms, which is one of the most in-depth courses you can find about this topic. But now, let's get started and implement our custom form control validator. Basic forms can be easily validated by using built-in validators that are coming with Angular forms. However, real business cases might require some additional validation logic that would be hard or impossible to achieve using native capabilities. Angular forms are designed in such a way that allows you to create your own validators to cover your specific use cases. I came up with an idea to create a word blacklist validator that doesn't allow to enter some specific words in the input. Very often users enter something like test instead of real data, which is actually valid values, but we don't want to have this fake data, so I want to ban such words. So let's get back to the source code. If you remember, in template-driven forms, validators are represented by regular Angular directives. So let's create one somewhere here, maybe next to my template forms page component. And I will use Angular CLI to generate it. So I type ngGD, which means generate directive. Then I define the path where it should be created. In my case, it's playgrounds, template forms, and validators folder. And the ban word will be the name of the directive. Additionally, I define this directive as a standalone because I'm not using ngModus in this project. And talking about the project, I should also say in which project this directive needs to be created. In my case, it is the Forms Playground project. Okay, I run this command and the directive was successfully generated for me and I can open it. Now let's import this directive into the component where we are going to use this validator. So here we go. And now let's apply this directive to the very first input right here. Cool, the directive has been applied, but it is quite useless so far. At least we should be able to provide a word that is supposed to be banned, right? So I would like to have something like that. And to be able to read the value I provided here, I need to create an appropriate input. And if I want to use this exact notation, where at the same time I declare the directive and provide some value, then I would need to create an input that matches the directive selector. So let's go and do that. Here I create a property that has the same name as a directive selector. It is an empty string by default and I decorate it with Angular input. Great. Now we can provide some values and read them here. To be a proper validator, it must have a validate method that contains the validation logic and returns an appropriate value. To be sure that we implement everything correctly, the directive class should implement a validator interface that will force us to properly implement the validate method. And if we implement it wrong, the TypeScript will tell us about that by throwing the error. All right. you can see that this function gets some abstract control, which is a base class for form control, form group, and form array. What exactly will we get here depends on where the directive was attached. I attach it to the ng model, so in this case, I will get a form control instance, but if I attached it to the ng model group, I would get an instance of form group. Also, here I can define the expected control value type and the row value type. The row values I won't be using here, so I can remove it, but the value I will be using, and I know that its value is going to be a string type. Also, the validator must return one of these values, either the validation errors, that is just a regular object, or null, if no errors are found. So let's try to write some logic. It is going to be a very simple one. I just return null if the control value doesn't match the banned word. Otherwise, I return the object where I have a key that matches the directive selector, and the value for this key is an object where I provide the word that is actually banned. By the way, the object structure you return is completely up to you. So now, we have logic implemented, and this directive could be used as a validator, but so far ngModel directive doesn't know that it is a validator directive. From ngModel's point of view, this is just a regular directive so far. To help ngModel recognize it as a validator directive, we have to provide the ngValidator's token in the directive providers, and then we should use the existing directive instance as a value for this token. And because we can apply multiple validators to the ngModel, we should also make it a multi-provider. Now we are ready to test our directive. So I can change the value to test string, and you can see that the field is invalid, so the directive works. However, it would be better if we could provide some improvements. For instance, we could add some message here below. Also, the check is case sensitive right now, so if I type any character in uppercase, it is considered to be valid. And I want to be able to provide an array of banned words instead of one single string. So let's quickly fix them one by one. First of all, I go to the template, and I'm going to add additionally an error message. This message we should see if the error is caused by app ban words validator, and we change the message to the following, like the value is not allowed, and the exact word I will read from the error message. How did I name it? Banned word. Awesome. So let's check if it works, and yep, you can see it in action and it works fine. So now let's go back and improve the logic. First of all, let's fix the case sensitivity by adding the toLowerCase method for both these values. Okay, done. And now let's implement the last feature, namely we should be able to provide the list, the array of banned words. So first of all, we define the available types for the property. So now it can be a string or an array of strings. Then I think it would be better to convert this input property to the setter, and every time this property changes, we would transform it to the array data structure. This data structure we should store somewhere, so let's create some private property like banned words. And now, as I said, once the input value changes, we do the check if the value is an array. Then we just assign it as it is. Otherwise, it is supposed to be a string, so I create an array that contains this one single string. Now I can work with my array inside the validate method, so I can create a constant like found banned word, and there will be the result of the find method that goes through the array of banned words and tries to find if the control value matches any value from the array. If it finds something, it returns this string, otherwise it will return undefined. And now if found banned word is undefined, we return null, otherwise we return the same object, but instead of these app banned words, we use our new constant because there will be a banned word. Okay, we are ready to test it out or not. Wait a minute, we have some problem. Aha, okay, it is because I forgot to add the set keyword. Now it is better, so let's go to the browser. And you can see that everything works okay. We see validation message and our validator handles also case sensitivity. Now let's try applying the directive to the another control, let's say nickname, but this time we provide an array of banned words. So something like that. Also, let's try to copy the error message from the first name field and paste it here, but with some small adjustments, of course. And namely, we replace first name to the nickname. Okay, awesome. Let's do the final test. I tried to enter a string test and it doesn't allow me to do that. The test_test is also prohibited, but something else works fine. So beautiful. Now let's quickly recap what we have learned. In order to create your custom validator that can be used with template-driven forms, you have to generate a new Angular directive. This directive should implement the validator interface that will force you to properly implement the validate method. Then you should implement your own validation logic here and return null if the value is considered to be valid, or you should return some object in case of errors. After that, you must bind this directive with the ngValidator's injection token and provide it in the providers array for this directive. Now you can import your directive in any component or a module where you are going to use it and apply it to any form control in your form. Alright, let's try to disable the custom app banned words validator. So here in the template, I will reuse the isAdult property and ban this array of words if the user is an adult. Otherwise, it will be just an empty array. So in such a way, we basically disable the validator. Now let's go to the browser and check it out. Now I will try to pick the year of birth that makes the user an adult and try to enter a nickname that should be banned by our custom validator. Then I will try to make the user younger than 18 years old, and the error is supposed to disappear, right? Because the array of the banned word will be an empty one. But we can see that it didn't happen and the error remains. The problem is that Angular validators are being executed when the form control value changes, but actually it didn't happen in our case. The only thing we changed is the validator directive input, but for Angular, changing the directive input is not the trigger to run validators. However, if we get back and try to change the form control value by editing the string and reverting it back to the previous value, you can see that the validation error disappeared. So we have to somehow give a hint for Angular when it should recheck the validation status, right? And this is how we can do it. I go to the VS Code, and if we have a look at the validator interface, you can see that besides the mandatory validate method, The validator can also optionally implement a register on validator change method, which provides some callback function. And as the description says, this callback function should be called when the validator inputs change. It sounds like exactly what we need. So let's go to our validator directive and implement this option method somewhere below the validate one, somewhere here we go. And we remember that some callback will be provided by Angular for this method. So let's add it here. This register on validator change method will be called only once when the validator is initialized. So we would need to store this callback somewhere and call it whenever we need it. That's why I'm going to create some private property. You can name it whatever you like. And this property has the same type as a callback function, and we assign some default value, which is an empty function. Then, once a register on validator change is called, we will assign the reference to the callback to this new property. After that, I can use it and call every time when I want to recalculate the validation state. In my case, I want to update the validation state once the validator directive input changes, just like that. And it will force Angular to recalculate the validation state for the control which has this directive attached. Now let's check if it works. I go back to the browser, I try to make my user an adult and provide a nickname that is supposed to be banned, and we see the error message, which is expected. And now I reduce the user's age below 18, and you can see now that the validation status was successfully updated. Alright, I hope you learned something new from this tutorial, and as I mentioned, this is just a tiny part of my entire video course about Angular forms, where we will go through most of the template-driven and reactive forms features in the first two course sections, and there we will create two similar and advanced interactive forms using both approaches. But that's not all. The course keeps a strong focus on custom form control implementation, so you will learn a lot about control value accessor and how it is used by Angular under the hood. The outcome of this section will be a few custom form controls like custom rating picker and simple text editor. Both will support template-driven and reactive forms, as well as validations and other form control features. The third component we will build is a really complex one. It is a drop-down component that supports option filtering, multi-selection, and accessible keyboard navigation. This component we will create completely from scratch by using only Angular CDK and no other third-party libraries. In the two remaining course sections, you will learn how to create Angular forms dynamically from JSON config. You will learn which architecture solution can help make it scalable and maintainable, and how to make it interactive by showing or hiding fields based on values from other form controls. The last section is about global validation error management, where you will learn how to dynamically render error messages for invalid form controls without generating a ton of boilerplate in your component templates. So if you want to level up your Angular skills without wasting months, if not years, trying to figure it out yourself, then hit the link in the video description and join the course. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video until the end. Subscribe to my YouTube channel to not miss the future free Angular content. Leave your thoughts, leave your comments, share this video if you find it useful, and I wish you a productive week ahead. Stay safe and see you in the next video.